This week, you read a number of texts to help prepare you for writing a fuller draft of your project. For the purposes of this video lecture, I really want to zoom in on the Anne Lamott reading. My students either tend to love or hate this reading from her. Some find her incredibly relatable and funny, and others cringe at her lack of sensitivity or what may be interpreted as an irreverent perspective of writing. She coins the first phrase of her writing process as the downdraft or the shitty first draft, where the goal is just to get everything written down. Then she moves into the updraft, where she fixes it up, and eventually she gets to the dental draft, where she's going in depth into each and every single part of the writing to see what needs to be changed. We might think of this in other terms as drafting, revision, and editing. Lamott isn't the only writing scholar to produce theories of writing. One of my favorites, who you did not read, is Donald Murray. He wrote a foundational piece called Teach Writing as Process, Not Product. In it, he argues that writing classes tend to be too heavily focused on the end result of the writing process. And instead, he thinks that writing teachers should worry about teaching their students the process of how to get to the end result. He, like Lamott, gives 3 stages of the process: pre-writing, writing, and rewriting. He argues that we spend the most time, a whopping 85% of our time, in that first phase. It's a very nebulous thing, as he points out that daydreaming is included as pre-writing. You're really getting an insight into my brain as a teacher with these readings. I chose Lamott specifically to try and help lessen the fear that might come with writing a research project. I really value you discovering a writing process that works for you. And as Murray suggests, I expect you to move through the process and look for places to improve your writing, as opposed to expecting some perfect piece of writing at the end. And that's reflected in our grading scale. As long as you're meeting the basic requirements I've laid out for you, there's no need to worry about submitting the most perfect research project you've ever completed. I encourage you to take pride in your work and submit something that you've worked hard on, but don't let that idea of perfection paralyze you in the writing process. And if you hate writing, it might be worth considering making some changes to your process. The reading this week presented it in a very straightforward way as a series of steps, so perhaps this is useful for you, perhaps it feels restrictive and you don't like it, and that's okay, but I want to talk about other ways that we can develop our writing processes so that things are perhaps slightly more enjoyable whenever you sit down to write. Something that I tend to find helpful when I write is to think about process in a sensory way. We have 5 senses as human beings, right? Sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Incorporating the senses into our writing process can be a fun way to adjust things. So for instance, when I sit down to write, I like to have something for each of my senses. It can differ depending on the day, but here are some things you can do for each sense. With sight, where is something that you can focus on your writing? Do you have a favorite room or a favorite place to study? What's easier to look at while you write, a computer screen or paper? Do you need to turn off the lights and work in a darker space? Can you work with other people around without getting distracted? For smell, can you burn a favorite candle? Spray a room spray, open the window, and let the scents from outside waft in. Do you need to feel better and more productive after a shower where you feel and smell clean? When it comes to taste, are you hungry? Do you need a snack? Would having an emotional support water bottle or a can of pop be helpful? Are you somebody who likes to chew gum or a mint? With touch, where are you most comfortable? Would you work better with a blanket or in bed? Are you someone who needs to sit at a desk for that structure? Do you need to leave your phone in another room or put it on Do Not Disturb so it's not vibrating or ringing while you're trying to write? For hearing, are you someone who likes to listen to music, or do you need to get as close to silence as you can? And maybe you work better with a TV show on in the background. And it might not always be the perfect situation, but if we pay attention to our bodies while we write and we take care of what our body needs, then we may have a better experience with writing. For me lately, as I've written the scripts for these videos, I've enjoyed sitting on my couch in the living room. I can look out the front window, and I have plenty of sunshine and natural light that comes in usually. I work on my laptop, which is a departure from how I typically write, but that's what's working best for me right now. I do have an air freshener down there, but sometimes I like to burn a candle and I swap out the candles I burn with each season, so it always matches the vibe that I'm seeing out the window. I keep my phone near me, but I put it on the back of the couch so that I won't get too distracted. I like to have a blanket while I work, and sometimes I like to have the TV in the background, and I listen to shows like West Wing, which is the greatest TV show of all time. If I choose to listen to music, I like Taylor Swift instrumental music or Tyler Childers. Lately, though, I've been listening to more Harry Styles, so feel free to make the writing process your own, adapt to your needs, your preferences. Because once we get comfortable, we can actually start writing. So you may have been introduced to outlines in the past, and it seems like a lot of high schools require students to submit outlines as part of a grade. Personally, when I'm drafting a piece of writing, I go for an outline. I like to physically write it down on paper, and then I go through multiple outline drafts to plan my writing. It's the way that my brain works best. It feels like a way to map out everything and break it down into specific pieces. However, outlines can feel restrictive or uncreative for people, and that's okay. Your process is your own. So if you've found in the past that outlines don't work for you in the traditional way, you can try something else to plan your writing. Mind maps are another popular tool. You can draw these out on a piece of paper, you can make them in Canva, you can use a specific mind mapping software like Padlet. In mind mapping, though, people essentially use bubbles to connect ideas, and this is a helpful way to see physical connections between your different sources, which can help contribute to the flow of your overall research project. Or you might just take Lamott's approach and write everything that comes to mind. And your first draft might be 6,000 words long because you just want to write all of the thoughts that enter your brain, whether it's directly related to your research or not. If we choose to follow Lamott, though, we need to go back and revise that possibly shitty first draft. Revision is always important, but especially in a situation like that, where you're just putting anything in. No matter what method we choose to use to draft our work, it's important that we focus on just writing first, and you can go back and edit later. Your brain can't effectively create and edit language at the same time. So if you typically write in a way where you're editing as you go, I encourage you to take a break from that process and try a new method instead. I know it's hard. I used to write that way too, and it was really difficult to break myself out of that habit, but it's worth it. You will probably find that it takes less time to write when you stop trying to edit as you go. As far as workplace skills go this week, you have peer review, and as you work on that, you're developing your teamwork skills as well as professionalism. How do you give and receive feedback when working with someone else? In thinking about your writing process, to me, that reflection indicates some self-development, especially if you change something about your process. In the meantime, this week, keep working on your project, and if you have any questions, please let me know.